Hi, my name is Lydia Kostopoulos, and I'm a strategy and emerging technologies advisor with a deep passion for body data tracking and human performance. All in the pursuit of feeling great and having as much energy as possible to pursue the things that fill me with joy and purpose. This interview series is about discovering how others have created and are curating their personal healthy aging protocol, one that aligns with their values and the person that they desire to be and become. I hope you find it to be of interest. Let's dive in. Susan, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about your healthy aging protocol. But first, I'd love it if you could just introduce yourself, tell us about you.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here. My name is Susan Magsamen. I will identify myself as the director of the International Arts and Mind Lab at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. I'm also the co-director of the NeuroArts Blueprint with the Aspen Institute and the author of the book, Your Brain on Art, How the Arts Transform Us. And I'll add that I'm also one of 5 girls and a twin.
Awesome. I definitely enjoyed your book, and I enjoyed hearing about your book before it came out, and I was really excited about it. And it's because of what you talk about the arts and how they affect our health that I was so incredibly curious to know about what your healthy aging protocol is. How are you deliberate and proactive about the way that you age? So yeah, I would love to hear all about it.
Well, thank you for the question. And I think it's a really important one that we ask ourselves intentionally how we want to age. Before I tell you my protocol, I remember coming out of COVID a couple of years ago, and it was in November. So we were just clearing it. And I was invited to give a talk at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was before the book came out, this winter before the spring the book came out. And I was really nervous about getting on a train and going to New York by myself and navigating taxis and hotels, and because I was totally out of practice. And I remember saying to myself, if I can't get over this, I'm going to be housebound. I'm going to be limiting my life. And I was trying to make my husband go with me, and he was like, I'm not going. You've got to go on your own. And I literally had a panic attack. I was like, I don't think I can do this. And I started to see how these little decisions could start to shift my worldview and make me start to feel like I was old. And it really scared me. And it was kind of a wake up call to be able to kind of face my fears and to figure out, like, what are those little things that I can do that allow me to feel safe in a world that I don't know. So the work that you're doing, I think, is so important, because I think we all start to shut down, sometimes unconsciously. And then all of a sudden, it's little moves that really make our world so much smaller. So I did go to New York. I called my husband about every 20 minutes. I was like, all right, now I'm getting in the cab. No, but it worked. And then the next time was easier. I always say the second time is easier, and then the next time was easier. And so I think, it's really building muscle and practice. Practice is super important, no matter what age you are. I think for me, my protocol is really 4 things, and I call them the aesthetic mindset, and I talk about this in the book. But the first one is curiosity. Curiosity has been a through line my whole life. Curiosity is really this idea of what's over the hill, what's around the corner, the idea of questions and asking and wanting to know and wanting to understand more, and really wanting to hear that without judgment. And then the second is what I call playful exploration. And that's to be able to explore without judgment or critique, is to just play around and mess around and not have to be great at something and not have to master it, but to really just delight in this idea of play and imagination and make believe, which we don't do a lot of. I think we're so transactional, not transformational. And Ivy Ross, who's my co-author, and I talk a lot about this, that, the opposite of play is not work. It's really depression. It's not being able to express yourself and feel safe in expressing yourself. And then the third is this idea around sensory awareness. What's the temperature? What does something feel like? What are you smelling? What's the light? But really feeling your environment, feeling the senses, your taste, touch, smell. We have many more than five senses, and really allowing your body to use these amazing mechanisms. And then the last is being a maker and a beholder, and doing both of those. Even right now, our conversation is an improvisation. I don't know what you're going to say. You don't know what I'm going to say. How do you make things without judging, and how do you continue to manifest, and then how do you perspective take, how do you behold, how do you take that information from others that they're putting out about themselves and help you become more of a whole person. So those are the four things: curiosity, playful exploration, sensory awareness, and being a maker and a beholder. And that's kind of how I live my life.
That's amazing. I love how it's called the aesthetic mindset. And so I want to just pull the thread on it. So curiosity is one of those things that has been identified as something that people who, make it to 100 have. They're curious about life, and to a certain degree that really helps with their mind, keeping it active and growing and all of that. I'm going to ask how you're intentional about each one of these, like in your daily life. So this is your protocol, but like, what does it look like when it's applied? So if we could start with curiosity, what does that look like when it's applied?
Sure. Well, I have a really long history with curiosity. I've started two companies actually three companies have the word curiosity in them. So Curiosity Kids, Curiosityville, and Curiosity Books. So I think it's, in a very practical level, it's having what Yo-Yo Ma calls a beginner's mind, not thinking you know everything. And so I'm so curious about how people do things, how they, stitch to mend a sock, how somebody makes a recipe, how someone decides on why they decided to take that photograph. And I think this idea of a beginner's mind, not thinking you've got all the answers. And, when you do think you have all the answers, the world gets pretty small, because then there's no need for these kinds of curious interactions. I think along with this beginner's mind is also an open heart and a smile. My husband and I travel a lot. We often traveled a lot before COVID and are starting to again. And I have this experiment where if I'm someplace and I don't know anybody, I just smile. And it's amazing how when you smile, people smile back at you. So that's my trick for opening up these curiosity conversations.
So this would then kind of fall in line with like the community being part of other humanity around you, I guess, is what that curiosity kind of opens up in an applied form. And then the second one is the playful exploration. So what does that look like in your life? Do you have to be intentional about it? Are there things that you already have on your calendar that are playful? Like, how does that work?
So I think by the very nature of it, it's really embodied. So it's a state of being where you move through the world without feeling like you've got to be perfect. That you've got to be judging every single thing that's happening, that there's got to be a strategy or an outcome or a result, but that you're just showing up without expectation, which is easier said than done, because I think we all are about checking the box. But it's really a mindset that, like, I go to get gas and somebody behind me is, getting gas, and I may say, how's your day? And, and what's going on? And it's a playful exchange. It's not, I'm there to get gas and that's the only reason that I'm there. And, that seems like a very small example, but it's in these small moments where playful exploration happens. It's using curiosity again, but it's also this idea of just messing around with stuff. I am right now, I'm doing a challenge, a 7-day challenge, where every morning I get a prompt on WhatsApp that gives me an art activity to do and asks me how I feel before I start and how I feel after. And I was looking around to see if I can find what I made. It's just like yesterday I took a photograph and I put stickers on it, and the first answer to the question was memories And the second part was this idea of more new memories. And I think it's not like, oh, it has to be beautiful. It's a photograph with stickers, right? So that's playing around. I was playing around with stickers. And I think the more we start to just, I plant a garden. It's not a perfect English garden. I plant a garden where I want these flowers to come in, and I'm playing around with color. I'm thinking about how color might come together, but I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't have an expectation of what's going to happen. I'm just planting these seeds to help them grow.
It sounds also like you're experimenting.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's a great word, experimenting.
Yeah, so I can see that, and I can see how you could apply that every single day, whether it's just being open to something different, and the fact that you have prompts. That's like an exercise every day that you're doing to keep your mind kind of engaged. And I still love stickers as well. So the third one is sensory awareness. How do you apply that in your day-to-day life?
I start my day with this idea of sort of what is my greatest purpose today. I sort of say that to myself when I wake up, what is your greatest purpose today? And I always sort of do like a body scan to sort of see like how I'm feeling, how I'm physically feeling. And I have rituals in the morning, like I get up, I feed the dogs, I make coffee, the smell of coffee, it wakes me up. This idea of showering where water is really warm. I can feel that on my skin. Our skin has so many touch receptors. Often I hum in the shower where I'm engaging the parasympathetic nervous system. I'm engaging the vagus nerve. I'm feeling better. Like I really have embodied these rituals that wake my body up, that really help me to come into the world, before I've, started to have conversations, or I've started to really build these rituals. And then and then throughout the day, I'm very aware of temperature and light. Light is a really big one for me, especially as the seasons are changing. As the seasons are changing into fall, really appreciating these changes. Things change all the time. We can't stop things from changing, but appreciating those changes and what becomes dormant, what becomes alive, what happens in those sensorial systems. And then at night, I also do kind of how to sort of shut my body down, how to know how my physical body is feeling, what's the temperature, where am I holding tension, how am I sort of relaxing my body into allowing it to restore and renew. And these all have become rituals for me. So I'm putting words to something that just is kind of a habit of mine now for me, that my body just moves into this. But it really allows me to feel fully alive and to also know what my body is saying. We often don't listen to our bodies. We override with our cognitive mind. And there's a great quote by a woman named Jill Bolte Taylor that says, we think of ourselves as thinking creatures that feel, but we're actually feeling creatures that think. And if you think about that, it's really true. We're always in our head. When we put ourselves in our bodies, we make different decisions about our physical health, about our mental health, about our well-being. And so remembering to be in your body through these sensory experiences is super important.
It also sounds like if you were very aware of your body, you would also be aware if something was wrong, and you would be more inclined to go to seek a healthcare practitioner to figure out what was wrong because you were already aware instead of overriding.
It's totally true. It's totally true. I in the last year or so, I started to have a hip thing, and because I could feel it at night, and I really thought that I was going to need a hip replacement. And so I went and saw an orthopedic, and they were like, okay, we can put cortisone in your hip. We can do talk about a hip replacement, or do some physical therapy. And I was like, I don't know. I think I need some additional advice. Like I'm not ready for that kind of experience. And so I went and saw a physical therapist who uses body work. And the first thing she said to me was, how much water do you drink? And I said, oh gosh, not much. And she's like, the problem is you need to drink more water. Your system is your like your hip bone's connected to your knee bone, but you don't have enough fluid in your body. And I was like, oh my God. And I started, and she gave me a couple of things like gentle movements, and this whole thing went away. And so, it's like sometimes I think we wait and wait and wait, and then we think the answer is really extreme, but sometimes it's as simple as somebody sort of helping you understand, like, oh, you need to just take better care. And I think a lot of us don't drink enough water, which is sort of crazy because we're so lucky to have water. And so something as simple as that, and how you kind of ride through that. And I wouldn't have gone to, if I wouldn't have sort of had this like little lingering pain, I wouldn't have done that.
I find that example so fascinating because it reminds me of the fact that none of us were given a manual of how to take care of our body. And so we just kind of like walk through life in the most important asset that we have, not understanding how it functions and not necessarily taking the best care of it, mostly because we don't really understand how it functions. And so this is a perfect example of you being able to have the chance to talk to somebody who understands how it functions and them giving you advice like, hey, how about some water? So that's a wonderful story.
It's also true that having agency over your body and knowing how you feel. Like when I met with this orthopedic person, and they had choices available, were extreme choices. And I knew intuitively, because I know my body, that didn't sound right. Like I needed more information. And I think a lot of times we don't have agency with healthcare professionals because we don't know what's happening, and we delegate and relegate our power to others in a way that may not always serve us well. And it's not for bad intentions, but it's when you know your body, sometimes it is these shifts of self-care and knowledge and, movement, like I dance every week, I move a lot. And knowing that these things are really important, but this idea of agency is really a big variable in this whole idea around knowing your sensorial systems, because when you know it, like what's happening, and then you can have more agency.
Yeah, and self-determination with that. So you mentioned you dance. Dancing sounds to me like it ticks your box of the playful exploration, and it also ticks the sensory awareness one. What's the dance that you've chosen to dance?
I don't have a dance style. I just dance to music, and I dance very freeform, so it's very playful. And every Friday night, my husband and I dance together. But I dance almost every day to a song that is in my head. I call it Earworms because it makes me feel good. And I feel like dance is the most amazing art form. If you could do anything, if anybody could do anything, even just sitting in their chair, dancing and moving, you'll feel better. Dance uses your motor cortex, it engages your sensory systems, it engages your cardiovascular system, your respiratory system, your immune system. Dance is like, if there was ever a magic wand, it's dance. And I feel like we just don't dance enough. And dance is also story. Every dance is a story. And so I'm a big proponent of dancing. And in our world, in the United States, usually we have to wait to go to a wedding to dance, or, for older adults. And it's just not true in other countries. Dancing happens everywhere. It happens on the weekends. It happens on the weeknights. And I feel like we should dance more. And so I'm a big advocate for dancing.
I love that. And I know that some of the research you've explored is dancing impacts on people with Parkinson's, if I'm not mistaken. Could you just quickly say what that research has found?
Sure. So this is really beautiful research, and a lot of it has come from the Mark Morris Dance Company. They have something called Dance for PD. And we're seeing dance be really helpful for people with stroke, with cerebral palsy, with injuries, things like that. But with Parkinson's, what we've seen pretty definitively now is that dancing improves gait, cognitive skills, sleep, and mood. And that's huge. Parkinson is a disease where the neurotransmitter dopamine is not produced in the brain at the level that's needed to maintain those functions. And so when you're dancing, other neurotransmitters kick in. So serotonin kicks in often, oxytocin, adrenaline, other endorphins kick in, and they actually replace the dopamine function of reward and pleasure, but also motor learning. And what I think is so great about that is people feel more connected to each other. They feel more themselves. They feel more whole. And as people dance more and more often and more regularly, there's research showing that there's longer what's called dose and dosage, the correlations between dancing and the benefits of symptom relief for Parkinson's is changing. And so it's really along with other kinds of interventions or therapies for Parkinson's, dance is an amazing collaborative integrative health use. And we're seeing that show up in lots of other ways. Just this idea of connection and rhythm and attention is so beautiful.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And now to your last one, in your protocol, you've got the maker and the beholder. How do you apply that in your day-to-day?
Well, first of all, the way how I define art is creative expression. And so that can be in any form. I'm a collager. I like to collage. So I don't collage every day, but I collage a couple times a week. I have a box of scraps and I collage and make different things. My husband and I cook a lot. So cooking is an art form and I do a lot of that. I'm also a gardener. So I garden pretty much all year long. As you know, I dance, I sing. I am often at some kind of performance, whether that's theater or music, and that's informal and formal, because I really love being around artists that are sharing their voices. And I think the thing that's really important for my art making is I'm not trained at any art form, and I'm really not proficient at any art form, but I get the same benefit because what we're starting to see is that from a neurobiological and physiological perspective, it's the doing, it's the process, not the object, not the finished piece that's so important. So I gain a lot of insight on the things that I make, and I certainly gain a lot of perspective by seeing other people's work that they make.
That's amazing. And also inspiring that our art doesn't have to be good to get that same kind of boost of energy and the health impacts that you've mentioned. My last question really is, you've got this protocol, you apply it every day. It's very much a part of your life, but why? Why do you do it? Why are you intentional about this?
Because I feel most alive and I feel most full of life and full of possibility and hopeful and happy. And, there are a lot of twists and turns in our lives, these experiences help me navigate those sorrows and joys. And I can find myself in it, and I can also find others for meaning and for purpose and for hope. And I think hope is something that we all need to face the challenges that are in front of us, that we don't know yet what they're going to be. So it's how I really feel I bring myself forward, and it just brings me tremendous sense of gratitude.
That's very inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me about it. This series is meant to capture personal stories of individual healthy aging protocols and is for informational purposes only, and it does not constitute providing medical advice or professional services. Those seeking personal medical advice should consult with a licensed healthcare practitioner. You can follow Susan's work on LinkedIn and on Twitter. Her handle is Susan Magsamen, and her Art and Mind Lab can be found at artsandmindlab.org.